Christians Courageous, Chapter 5. A Willing Helper. Clara, Barton. It is sometimes easy in reading the works of history that glorify the actions of historical figures to forget that they were people like you and me. They were human beings who were willing to work hard for their beliefs. Clara Barton believed in human dignity, in sickness and in health, in life as well as death. She dedicated her life to the service of humanity. Clara was a little girl who loved horses. She was born on Christmas Day in 1821. She had a happy country childhood. Then one day her brother David was badly hurt. It looked like he was going to die. The doctors worked on David, but he only grew worse. He became weaker and weaker. "Perhaps the boy's case is hopeless," said one worried doctor. "No," cried Clara. "I have prayed to God to make him well, and I will help make him well." And so Clara spent hours with her ailing brother. She cheered him up when he lost hope. She read to him. She liked it when she read from the Psalms. Clara read so beautifully, and the Psalms were full of hope. Then, slowly, David got better. "Clara," the doctor said, "David would have died without you. You have a wonderful way with healing." Clara always remembered these words. When she became a teacher, she loved her work. Her students loved her, but in her heart she felt there was something else she had to do. In 1861, Clara was working at the Patent Office in Washington. She saw the sad face of President Lincoln. She heard his words, "War is coming. The sick and wounded will need much help." Clara Barton prayed that God would show her what to do to help. Soon, wounded soldiers began to arrive in Washington. Many were dying. They needed fresh bandages. They needed good food. Clara collected blankets and linen and food. She rushed around getting apples and cherries and roasted chickens and hams. But that was not enough for Clara. She felt God was calling her to do more. She remembered teaching her students about Christian charity. She loved the Sermon on the Mount. She had all her students read it. Now she remembered the words of Christ. "Blessed are the merciful." "I must go to the battlefields," cried Clara. "Too many boys are dying there. Their bandages need changing. They need quick care. It is not enough to wait for them to get to Washington. A woman cannot go where there is a rifle fire and cannon shells exploding," her friends insisted. Clara did not listen. She formed wagon trains of supplies. She filled them with bandages and food. She packed apple jelly and berry jam. The wounded soldiers often had nothing but hard crackers and bad pork to eat. Clara knew they needed better food. Clara rode into the battlefield. Several times bullets came so close she could smell the powder. Her blouse was torn by shell fragments. She paid no attention to this. She went about her business. In the midst of one battle, there was a desperate need for wine. The wounded needed it to dull their pain. It was needed in operations. "I don't think there is any wine," Clara said, but she searched in the wagons she had brought anyway. Many generous people sent wagon loads of supplies. Clara did not always know everything that was there. Clara cried out, "Look, a box of wine bottles. God heard our prayers." Clara spent hours in her tent, cooking hot meals for the wounded. One badly hurt boy whispered to her, "Could I have a chocolate cake?" The others laughed. How could anyone ask for a chocolate cake in the middle of a terrible battle? The boy's fever was making him crazy. But Clara smiled and said firmly, "You shall have it." And she hurried to her tent. Somehow she found flour and eggs. She baked the chocolate cake. She put on thick fudge frosting. The boy had his wish before the day was over. During a wild, raging rainstorm, Clara rode to another battlefield. She arrived drenched to the skin and covered with mud. As usual, she rushed into action. She washed the wounds of all the men in need. She bound the wounds with fresh linen. When the Civil War ended, Clara spent many years looking for missing soldiers. Some had died and no records were left. The families didn't know what had happened to them. Clara was able to track down many names. But Clara Barton's work was far from over. She served the wounded in a European war. She fought for 10 years to set up the Red Cross in America. In 1889, a terrible disaster struck Johnstown, Pennsylvania. After heavy rains, a dam broke. Of water covered the town. Hundreds died. I must go there and help those poor people, Clara said. But she was now almost 70 years old. You're too old, too tired, her friends said. The little lady would not listen. Off she went to care for suffering people. She rolled up her sleeves and set up tents and soup kitchens for the people of Johnstown. The houses of Johnstown were broken like sticks of wood. Thousands were homeless. Clara served them and rounded up lost and frightened children. She worked for a long time in Johnstown. When it was time for Clara to leave, a local minister called a meeting. The white-haired preacher said, "This lady was the first to come when we needed her. She is the last to go. She stayed as long as people suffered. She has been our older sister. She has nursed and comforted the sick and homeless. We thank God for her as we thank Him for sunlight and starlight." Everybody clapped for Clara Barton, but she was embarrassed. She never liked to be praised. She smiled and hurried away. Clara Barton's father called her "my Christmas baby." She's never forgot that. Like Jesus, she was born on Christmas Day, and like Jesus, she tried to comfort people. She showed love and compassion to those most in need.